as you saw in the end credits, his was the picnic of all picnics. How the basic stuff, which is still interesting, like how was the project brought to you, and did you think it was great right away, or did you sort of have to sink into the concept and work with it? The idea of having the feature of 10 shorts.
Yeah, the producer, Pablo Cruz, proposed me the idea, I don't know, maybe 6 months before shooting. I wasn't very interested because of the omnibus thing, which is, I mean, usually the unevenness of the films doesn't make the whole film work. But two things really convinced me. One was that I knew that the Mexican Revolution was very meaningful for all of us, probably in a bad way, but meaningful. So there probably would be some sort of feeling of coherent feeling at the end of the film. And it actually happened. I like this idea of failure or like real huge complaint about what's going on in Mexico. And that, even if the films are uneven in a lot of senses, that brings the whole thing together. And then another thing which was very important was that for the first time in my life I got paid and would have to take care of the post-production and all the work, like really shoot, hand over the materials, and wait for the film to come out. Which is what a lot of filmmakers do, and I understand why they like to do it that way. I self-produce my films, and it's always huge problems and nervousness all the way through. Whatever. That was very important. I got paid better. I mean, I earned more money with this little short than with all the films I've made in my life.
Three features. His other films are Japan, Battle in Heaven, and Silent Light. And hopefully you can make that. Hopefully, so there was freedom making this one as far as content and story.
Totally, yes. That was of course very important. The only thing was that the only limit was a 10-minute limit as a maximum limit only, and then the idea that it had to do with the Mexican Revolution, but not necessarily in a historical way, as you can obviously see, but just as an allegory or whatever it meant to you, like, in a very personal way.
There's a good balance of contemporary and past in all of them. And in yours, I'm guessing a lot of it wasn't scripted, and a lot of it sort of came naturally, let's say. But did you gather people and tell them what you expected or what might happen?
Basically because I knew I couldn't make like a discourse about the revolution in 10 minutes, or even in a feature you cannot do anything except approaching somehow laterally things. And in this case, I thought instead of trying to tell you the story of the revolution, the idea was like what for me is the nature of the Mexican Revolution, which is the same nature as for the Mexican independence and the Mexican chaos of today, which is basically that we don't have at all like a common goal or idea of what we want as a group of people. Like the U.S. would be the total opposite of that. I mean, the way it was founded with the manifest destiny and the idea of conquering a land of freedom and all that. Mexico is a totally different process, and that's for the good and for the bad. It's not necessarily bad, worse than the U.S. case, but well, presently it must be. I don't know, but so whenever since I was a child, and whenever you're in a wedding or riding a taxi, in whatever situation you are in Mexico, you see how the society is structured and how relationships go, and that's it. That's the revolution. That's everything. So I decided to make this meal and invite friends from all sorts of backgrounds and origins. So there's like people from the countryside, like peasants, people that work in industries in Mexico, wealthy people, cellular aristocrats, and whatever you want. And I just brought them all together for this meal in the countryside without absolutely any ideas of what they had to do. I just told them it was like an ordinary meal, except that it was going to be taped. And people just drank and enjoyed it, and then eventually all that happened. It was really interesting to see like this mass process of going crazy, and at a certain point I felt like in the Lord of the Flies, where I could have said, now let's kill all ladies or something like that, and everyone would do it. And another very interesting thing is, like, defining freedom is so difficult, and somehow it seems like there's a dimension of freedom which can be also like kicking the table in front of you at a certain point. I don't know if that's really intelligent or not, but the children started like destroying the car and all that.
So the car just was there?
The car was there. I knew it wasn't in certain danger since the beginning, because I knew that a lot of people, just because they knew it was a film, they would stretch the limits somehow. So I talked with the owner of the land, and he was the owner of the car, and he's a good friend, and he said, don't worry, they destroy it. Please just help me find another one. And it was not a problem. But the children started, and then everyone followed, and then the following day, I asked some of the children why did they enjoy it so much, because they said that was the best part of their lives or something. And I asked the son of a friend, why did he like it so much? And he said, because no one told me what to do. Like, since he was born, probably, he had always been told what to do at every single moment. And there he felt this freedom. And so it was very interesting at many levels, for sure.
And were there people that did not have a good time by the end? Or
yeah,
it's different
sure.
when there's cameras?
Well, you know, my mother, for instance, was totally scandalized, and and during the event, she actually came to me and she said, Carlos, what's your problem? So this is the Mexican Revolution for you, destroying a car and getting drunk, you yourself also? And then, so I actually said, well, what do you think? In the revolution, people were not scandalized and sad. And, I mean, it's not like something for books or just stamps and ideas like Villa and all this, you know. It's basically suffering and death. You know, out of 8 million people living in Mexico at the time, 1 million died. So, of course, I mean, I suppose a lot of people were scandalized and suffering a lot. So, some people were shocked, and some people were actually very annoyed at me. But some others understood that that wasn't the point at all. And actually, the ones that were annoyed, like my mother, for instance, maybe the day after she understood more what was going on and stopped being angry.
How do you learn about the revolution? Let's say like in elementary, first grade, second grade, growing up there. Is there a textbook?
In a very sad way, I think. Yeah, there's textbooks, but it's basically all like really superficial mythology. Yeah, very fact-based, but with not much analysis behind. Yeah, I remember I studied in England for a year in my life, and I remember the way they taught the Second World War there, and like the whole Anglo-Saxon approach to history in teaching is much more interesting. Here, in like the Latin way, very often it's just like the data, you know, like when things started and who was fighting whom and where were the battles, but not the analysis behind all that. And because, of course, the result of the revolution is the PRI, which was in power for 70 years, it all really became like pathetic mythology, in my opinion. Yeah.
Is there a point that you learned more about it then later in life through a different source?
No, well, later in life, I personally have read the real sources, like the whole books. Well, personally, I mean, then I can have my own opinion, you know, which is that basically the revolution is very similar to what is going on today. It's just it's a power struggle of people with power using the people, the ordinary people, as objects, basically, and they're the ones that suffer, of course.
There's one more question, then we'll see if there's any from the audience. My favorite shot, although the car burning is pretty freaking awesome, when they're following a woman and it goes up and slows down and you see sort of the family structure of the man with holding the child and the close-up of the hand is incredible. And I'm guessing because of everything else, that's on accident?
It is an accident, yes. Yes, they were there, and probably they were not enjoying the party so much. Or maybe they were, but I mean, that's the way. I was recently in France, and someone in the audience asked me, why didn't I invite the Indians, as she called them, it was just Mexican people, but she said the Indians, to the party since the beginning. And I said, why did I put them aside or something like that? And I said they were put aside 500 years ago, basically. And they have learned to keep quiet and probably only come out in the dark, you know? Keep their, it was terrible to see that they weren't happy at the beginning, eating and enjoying that part of the meal. And only when people were drunk, they were joining in more openly and yeah, enjoying it. So in the end, it's really, to a certain point, I feel like the film has the same structure of whatever happened in that period, which is like a Belle Époque, before the actual explosion of the conflict, where basically the bourgeois and the white people are enjoying it more, like really showing off and showing their dress and talking and enjoying the drinks. And then later things get heated up and everything changes. That's very much what happened between the turn of the century until the 1920s, when the revolution was finished.
Did you replace his car?
Yes. For a bicycle. No.
Other questions?
No, he's a really good friend, the owner of the land, and he's going to get it.
I'm trying to see. Got questions about his short or any of his films. Sorry. Okay. Go ahead and speak.
I've lived in Mexico for months and years at a time, and I love it dearly. Perhaps I have an idealized attitude toward Mexico, even as you have toward the United States. We see our own problems more clearly. Frankly, I found it upsetting. I was really transformed, though. Most of the people I know in Mexico are highly disciplined, really hard workers. Corazones de corazón, la gran mayoría. The majority of them have hearts of gold, and I didn't see this kind of out of control behavior.
Well, what I can tell you is that the people that made these films are very much more in the way I feel, and they all live in Mexico. But I have to say, first of all, that I don't have I hope I don't have an idealization or an idealized idea about the U.S. at all. Actually, before when I said that our process was totally different, I said none is better than the other. I mean, I know, for example, Mexican immigrants in States work very hard, but I mean, this is of course a generalization, but in Mexico usually people don't like to work very hard, which is not necessarily bad. Actually, it's probably more intelligent than working hard, for sure. I'm not sure. But I really think people don't like, I mean, I have a friend, I live in the countryside, and a lot of people come to the US very often. I mean, yeah, sometimes they stay for years, sometimes longer, sometimes a short time. And one of them that goes to Canada actually every year, he's a legal immigrant, but he works in agriculture. And I asked him recently, so what do you prefer, Canada or Mexico? And he said, well, Mexico, of course. And I thought he was going to talk about the family and tortillas and, you know, all that kind of thing. And he said, and I said, why? And he said, well, because in Canada you have to work, man. And he said, there, if you don't work, you're really in trouble. But here it's wonderful. So I really don't know. I mean, I don't want to preach, but what I feel is that, and I don't think it's necessarily bad, not wanting to work so much. Or having that kind of extreme activity, in my opinion, is not bad. It's not. And for example, if this would have been a German party, they would all have been very much enjoying in the same way. They would be singing songs and having the beer and laughing a lot. And in my opinion, that's not better than this at all. It's probably more depressing. Like, I don't know, the Germans, for example, they are very disciplined and everything, and then they drive cars very fast, and then they enjoy football, soccer, and drink a lot of beer. So each people has its way out, and this Mexican way, I think, is wonderful. It's very connected to the Viking way of, like, ecstasy.
Let it off steam.